Well, as predicted, the US Supreme Court has ruled that former presidents, including Donald J. Trump, are entitled to some degree of immunity from criminal prosecution, dramatically reducing the likelihood that the federal criminal case against Donald Trump on charges that he plotted to stop the transfer of power will proceed before the November election. The court's conservative majority, which Donald Trump created, found 6-3 that presidents were protected from prosecution for official actions that extended to the outer perimeter of his office, but could face charges for unofficial conduct. And this is really the issue, isn't it? Which is unofficial and which is official conduct when it comes to the president of the United States. Certainly when it comes to the disgraced former president, Donald Trump, because as we know, he is somebody who treads a very fine line between what is official business and what is Trump business, because all decisions made whilst Donald Trump was the president were on Donald Trump's terms to enrich and protect Donald Trump. He's accused of overseeing the effort to subvert the 2020 election, 2 counts of conspiring to obstruct the certification of the election results, conspiring to defraud the government, and conspiring to disenfranchise voters. And now, Jack Smith and Judge Tanya Chutkan are going to have to move the goalposts to see how this case can work under this new ruling, with the Supreme Court making the decision that official business is now under the protection of presidential immunity. But there's something here that I think that we haven't really, or certainly the media hasn't been talking about or picking up on, and that is that Donald Trump is not the president. He's not the incumbent. He's going to be fighting an election where it's not like he can't say, okay, I'm not relinquishing power as he did in 2020 or 2021. This time, he is seeking the White House. Joe Biden is the president. And so there's 2 issues here. One, Joe Biden could actually take this new immunity ruling and say, okay, if I'm not immune from various things, then I'm going to make some sweeping and swooping changes. And it's being suggested that packing the court could be one of those. Doing away with the filibuster, for example, things that people have been pushing for a while to bring some normalcy and balance back into the political system. But secondly, there's the issue that this entire immunity package that the Supreme Court has placed on a silver platter for Donald Trump is designed for him to stay in power once he ascends to the presidency. They are assuming that he will either win the presidency, or they're working on the assumption that if he loses, he will then contest the election, as he did in 2020, and that this time the Supreme Court will rule in his favor. Because this entire experiment is and I would suggest that Roe, 50 years ago, was the moment at which conservatives, these far-right Christian nationalists, were like, we don't want this. We want to have no separation of church and state. We want a Christian nation of Christian nationalists, of Christian soldiers, with the kind of leader that is not going to have to seek election, who can just remain in power. I'm convinced that actually this is all part of a larger conspiracy. And if you do your research on Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society and the way that the Supreme Court has kind of become this kind of platform for Donald Trump's puppet masters, then you get a greater sense of what this is all about. And look at January 6th, for example. We now see that not just the Clarence Thomas's wife being involved in that, but of course, Judge Samuel Alito's wife having a vested interest as well. It seems that these far-right Christian nationalists are all operating off the same hymn sheet, and that at all levels. And whilst Samuel Alito will be like, oh, that was my wife's business, I didn't have anything to do with it, none of that is true. And we've kind of come to realize that actually the conspiracy here is one that there has been a plan all along. Pack the court with far-right Christian nationalists, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, use the power of Donald Trump's presidency to get rid of Roe and to make the, necessary changes for the next presidency. And of course, their plan is, as I say, if he doesn't win, I personally don't think Donald Trump will win. And there's a good chance that actually this ruling, this announcement from the Supreme Court today, on their very last day of hearings, incidentally, this actually could be helpful to Joe Biden, the Democrats, because it is a clear mandate for extremism, a clear mandate for the kind of extremist presidency and kind of dystopian America that these people have been planning for. So they are planning for Donald Trump to either win, or if he loses, to contest the election, and then for them to give him their support. Some people have been saying, oh, well, does that mean that they're in the tank for Trump? It's like, are you kidding me? Like, the Supreme Court, Trump's Supreme Court, because of course he added, 3. So it's 6-3. This court, this conservative or MAGA Republican court, was always in the tank for Donald Trump. Despite what they said at their interviews about Roe being precedent, they were always in the tank for Donald Trump. And there has been this kind of long-term plan to install either Trump or somebody like Trump as their de facto leader going forward. And that's why Project 2025 now makes a lot more sense. This Heritage Foundation document that talks about rebuilding the federal government in Donald Trump's image, or whichever. Interestingly, it's not specific to Trump. It's about whichever kind of far-right Christian nationalist leader is ultimately going to win the presidency by through the election or through them contesting the election. And in fact, Trump was asked just the other day, during the debates, will you accept the results of the election? And his answer is, if they're fair, and if they're basically, if I win, is what he's saying. So Donald Trump has admitted again that if he does not win the election through the traditional means, i.e. through the vote, then he will contest it, and his people, i.e. the Supreme Court and those other puppet masters, will then install him as the leader. This is a political coup. This is not like the coup with the fake electors scheme of 2021. This is a new coup from the inside out, or from the top down. You see, they failed last time. And a lot of us have been predicting that January 6, 2021 was the rehearsal, and that now comes the real event. It's going to happen. And just a couple of days ago, everybody was getting their knickers in a twist about Joe Biden being unwell on the night of the debate and not being on good form. And now people seem to have forgotten that. And then everyone's like, well, how do we help Joe Biden right now? And I think that is the right way to go. Joe Biden is the Democratic candidate. He is the right man for the job. He has more experience in politics, in US politics, than anybody else. And if you look back at kind of old footage, as I've been doing the last 24 hours, you'll see that, he really, the man inside, forget the stutter and the aging process, but the man inside, the brain inside, is very, very smart. And I do think he's the right man to counter this. I would like for him, if possible, and maybe Kamala Harris can assist with this, to be a revolutionary, because, packing the court, doing away with the filibuster, or indeed taking this new ruling of presidential immunity and saying, okay, if that now applies to me because I'm the president, then I am now going to say A, B, and C, which is Donald Trump can't run for president. I mean, because he's an insurrectionist, so he can't run for president. Could the power of the presidency now with full immunity do that? There's so many questions at this moment, but I want to be clear that this ruling is not about now, and it's not about Donald Trump in November. It's about Donald Trump staying as president after 4 years. It's about maintaining Donald Trump or another MAGA Republican in that role of leader beyond 2020, 8 or whenever it is, right? So this is about maintaining control. Firstly, they did it controlling women by reversing Roe. And now the Chevron announcement from 2 days ago, it might not seem very interesting, but that basically takes control of all major decisions for the United States that were done by agencies. So, for example, let's use climate change. Instead of the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, having jurisdiction over climate change, now the Supreme Court have jurisdiction. So now 6 conservative justices can decide that climate change is not real and that there doesn't have to be any legislation to support it. Meanwhile, Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social platform shortly after the court issued its decision on his immunity case. He said, "Big win for our Constitution and democracy. Proud to be an American." I mean, it's just so blatant. All of this was the plan. This was all joined up. The justices working for Trump, Trump waiting for the decision that he knew was coming. In dissent, Justice Sotomayor said, the president is now a king above the law. The 3 liberal justices, Sonia Sotomayor, Eleanor Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson, all dissented from the majority opinion. In her dissent, Sotomayor said the relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of political power, the president is now a king above the law. And she warned of the stark long-term consequences of today's decision, noting that the court had effectively created a law-free zone around the president. This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interests, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interests of the nation. She said the president of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Organizes or takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune. Immune, immune, immune. The US Supreme Court has overturned one of its own most important precedents this week, the Chevron doctrine that for the past 40 years has guided the work of federal government in critical areas of public life, from food and drug safety to environmental protection. So think about that now. You have this opinion, which has been on statute since 1984, which requires the courts to defer to the knowledge of government experts in their reasonable interpretation of ambiguous laws. Expertise now has been thrown out in favor of judges making decisions about things that they know nothing about. This is massive, and whilst it might not sound, particularly interesting, it is so essential to understand the history of the Chevron doctrine. And so we find ourselves in a constitutional crisis, a place where an election is looming and decisions about how to fight this election are now on everybody's minds. I hope that people have got over the Joe Biden debate debacle. I think that his performance the day after at a rally was so energized. I made another video about why I think he was the way he was on the night of the debate. And just to kind of sum up, the debate environment, the TV studio is not a natural environment for Joe Biden. He's much more comfortable on the rally stage. He's much more comfortable on the stage at the State of the Union address. The TV studio is a very unnatural kind of fake environment, and he is not a fake. He's a real person. And the reason Donald Trump does better in that studio environment is because he is a fake, and everything about him is faked. He is a made for television president. He lied. Well, he didn't not lie. Every single answer he gave was false and should have been fact-checked in real time. And so hopefully now people are starting to realize that Donald Trump just lied his way through that debate, and Joe Biden, whilst he was not on top form, at least he kind of held the truth close to his heart. So it is a momentous and historic day today that the Supreme Court have even suggested that the president or a former president is immune from prosecution for his actions, his official actions. It is mindless, it is senseless, but this is what we have to understand is now normal in the United States, because the Supreme Court is bought and paid for, and we can look to those. I mean, I mentioned Leonard Leo, but, Harlan Crow, as we know, with him whining and dining Clarence Thomas. It is not the court you thought it was. And if you thought, as many of my legal colleagues did, that the court would do the right thing, those days are over. And, I stand by my predictions that this court is very much Donald Trump's personal legal firm. And that's the way it's going to go. So now the strategy needs to be, how do you deal with Donald Trump when he goes to the Supreme Court to fight the loss of his planned election win in November? Because I don't believe Donald Trump can win. I don't believe he's as popular as he claims he is. He can't even get a rally crowd together. And yet he is now like a Trojan horse from the inside. He has set the wheels in motion for courts at every level. We're seeing it with in Florida with Judge Eileen Cannon. These are the people who are Donald Trump's soldiers. But they just happen to be judges. And all of this has been done by design. And there are a whole lot of people involved in making this, building this empire for Donald Trump from the inside. So, none of this is coincidence. This is a conceived plan to rebuild the federal government and to maintain MAGA Republican rule forever. Because if Donald Trump is to win in November, you will never get a free vote ever again. I'm Anthony Davis. You can catch me on the 5 Minute News YouTube channel and podcast, on Wednesdays co-hosting Uncovered, and on Sunday on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.